Look closely, can you feel it? There's a new beat thrumming across Africa, from the bustling tech hubs of Lagos to the gleaming new skylines of Addis Ababa. This isn't the Africa of old newsreels, a continent defined by someone else's stories. This is the Africa of now. Imagine the sun rising over Nairobi, its golden light catching the glass towers that pierce the sky, reflecting a future being built at lightning speed. Down below, the streets are a river of motion, of young innovators with smartphones in hand, coding apps, launching startups, and dreaming in gigabytes. They are not waiting for permission. They are creating their own reality, one line of code at a time. This is a continent where the median age is just 19. A wellspring of creative energy and untapped potential that is reshaping not just its own destiny, but the entire world's. This dynamism is everywhere. It's in the vibrant art scenes of Accra, where painters and sculptors are telling distinctly African stories that fetch millions on the global stage. It's in the textile markets of Dakar, where fashion designers blend traditional patterns with modern silhouettes, creating a style that is unapologetically African and globally coveted. This energy is fueled by a generation that is more connected, more educated, and more ambitious than any before it. They see the challenges, the legacy of colonialism, the infrastructure gaps, the political instabilities, not as roadblocks but as problems to be solved. They are the architects, the engineers, the entrepreneurs, and the leaders of a continent on the move, building a narrative of progress and self-determination. This isn't a quiet revolution. It is a loud, vibrant, and confident roar. It's the sound of a continent claiming its rightful place on the global stage. For too long, Africa was a chapter in other nations' history books, a place where geopolitical games were played by outside powers. But the players have changed, and so has the game. The continent is no longer content to be a passive recipient of aid or a source of raw materials for others' factories. It is demanding a seat at the main table, not just to be heard, but to help set the agenda. This new self-assurance is the driving force behind a monumental shift in global power dynamics. A shift that finds its most potent expression in Africa's growing alignment with new global partnerships. The world is changing, and Africa is no longer just a spectator. It is a central character in the unfolding drama of the 21st century. The continent's leaders, backed by a population of over 1 billion people, are looking at the old world order and asking a simple question: does this system still serve us? For many, the answer is a resounding no. They are looking for new alliances, new financial systems, and new pathways to development that respect their sovereignty and recognize their agency. This quest for a more just and equitable world is drawing Africa into a fascinating dance with emerging powers, creating a new axis of influence that promises to redefine the very meaning of global power for generations to come. So what is this BRICS thing everyone keeps talking about? For years, it was just a catchy acronym cooked up by an economist. Brazil, Russia, India, China. South Africa joined later, adding the S, and giving the group its first African foothold. For a while, the world looked at it as a sort of B-list club of nations. Interesting, but not quite ready for the main stage. But something has changed. BRICS has evolved from an investment term into a powerful political and economic statement. It has become the most visible symbol of a world that is moving away from a single Western-led power structure towards something more complex, more diverse, and, its members argue, more democratic. It's a club for the rising, for the nations who feel the old rules were written for someone else's benefit. The mission of BRICS is simple yet revolutionary: to create a global environment where power is shared more equitably. It stands for a multipolar world, where decisions are not dictated from one or two Western capitals, but are made through consensus among a broader group of influential nations. The Bloc now represents a staggering portion of the planet. As of 2025, with its new members, we're talking about nearly half of the world's population and over a third of the global economy. Think about that. This isn't a small protest group, it's a heavyweight contender with the economic muscle and demographic might to back up its ambitions. It's a platform for the global South to coordinate, to trade, and to build a future that isn't dependent on the whims of Washington or Brussels. The recent expansion in 2024 and 2025 was a game changer. It was the moment BRICS went from being a concept to a concrete reality with massive geopolitical weight. The invitation extended to nations like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE wasn't just about adding more flags to the family photo. It was a strategic move to bring in key players from critical regions, particularly Africa and the Middle East. This expansion signaled that the desire for an alternative to the Western-dominated order was not just a fringe idea, but a mainstream global movement. Dozens of other countries are now lining up from Nigeria to Senegal, hoping to join or partner with the Bloc. They see BRICS not as an anti-West crusade, but as a pro-global South platform for reform and empowerment. For Africa, this is monumental. The continent is no longer represented by a single voice in the group. With the inclusion of Egypt and Ethiopia alongside South Africa, Africa now has a powerful caucus within this emerging global force. It means that African priorities, from infrastructure investment and fair trade to debt relief and a stronger voice in institutions like the UN, are no longer just items on a wish list. They are now central to the agenda of a bloc that commands the world's attention. BRICS offers a new stage where African nations can speak for themselves, forge their own alliances, and collectively bargain for a better deal on the world stage, transforming the group's dynamics from the inside out. So why are African nations so drawn to this new arrangement? It's not about picking a team in some new Cold War, it's about agency. It's about African leaders and citizens deciding for themselves what is in their best interest. Take South Africa, a founding member. For years it has used its position in BRICS as a megaphone to amplify not just its own voice, but the voice of the entire continent. South Africa sees itself as a gateway, a bridge between the Bloc and the wider African agenda. It champions the call for reform at the World Bank and the IMF, arguing that these institutions must reflect the world as it is today, not as it was in 1945. For Pretoria, BRICS is a tool to demand respect and build a more balanced global system. Then you have the new members, each with its own clear-eyed reasons. Egypt, a civilization that has been a crossroads of continents for millennia, is making a strategic pivot. Cairo is seeking to diversify its partnerships, moving beyond its deep-rooted reliance on the United States and Europe. The goal is economic resilience. By joining BRICS, Egypt hopes to attract massive investments for its development projects and increase trade using national currencies, which helps protect its economy from the shocks of global dollar fluctuations. It's a pragmatic move by a historic power to reclaim its economic independence and forge alliances that come with fewer political strings attached, especially in a region fraught with geopolitical tensions. Ethiopia's entry tells another powerful story of African ambition. As one of the continent's fastest-growing economies and a diplomatic heavyweight in the Horn of Africa, its decision to join BRICS is deeply strategic. Addis Ababa is pursuing an ambitious economic reform agenda and needs capital to fund massive infrastructure projects, from industrial parks to clean energy grids. China is already a major partner, and joining BRICS solidifies this relationship while opening doors to investment from Brazil, India, and others. For Ethiopia, the Bloc is a vehicle to finance its national transformation on its own terms, leveraging its strategic location to become a manufacturing and logistics hub for the entire region. It's about building a prosperous future, brick by brick, with partners who are willing to invest in that vision. Ultimately, this African wave into BRICS is driven by a shared desire for a partnership of equals. These nations are not turning their backs on the West, but they are refusing to be limited by it. They are tired of being lectured on governance while being offered loans with crippling conditions. They are seeking partners who will invest in their industries, not just extract their resources. This isn't about ideology, it's about dignity. It's a collective statement from a continent that is done asking for a seat at the table. Instead, it is joining with others to build a whole new table, one where everyone has a voice and the rules are designed to be fair for all who sit there. For decades, the story of Africa's relationship with the global economy was one of dependency. It was a story of aid, of debt, and of structural adjustment programs dictated by faraway financial institutions. The script was always the same. In exchange for loans from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, African nations were often required to implement austerity measures, privatize state assets, and slash public spending. While presented as tough medicine for economic health, these policies often hurt the most vulnerable and limited the ability of governments to invest in their own people. This old model created a cycle of debt and dependency, leaving many nations feeling like they had little control over their own economic destinies. The quest today is to break that cycle for good. This is where the promise of BRICS becomes so powerful. It offers a fundamentally different approach, one centered on investment rather than conditional aid. African nations are not looking for handouts, they are looking for partners who will help them build. They want to build factories that turn their raw materials into finished goods, creating jobs and value at home. They want to build power plants that can light up their cities and run their industries. They want to build modern roads, railways, and digital networks that connect their markets and their people. The BRICS nations, particularly China, have become major sources of this kind of development finance, funding the very infrastructure projects that are transforming the continent's economic landscape. A central part of this quest for economic sovereignty is the move away from the US dollar. This isn't some conspiracy, it's simple economics. When almost all international trade is conducted in dollars, developing nations are incredibly vulnerable. If the US Federal Reserve changes its interest rates, it can send shockwaves through their economies. If a country falls out of favor with Washington, it can be locked out of the global financial system through sanctions. To counter this, BRICS is championing the use of local currencies for trade between its members. Imagine Brazil buying Nigerian oil with reais, or India trading with South Africa in rupees. This de-dollarization insulates their economies and gives them more control over their monetary policy. This shift is about creating options. For an African finance minister, having more than one place to turn to for a loan is a game changer. It creates competition and gives them more bargaining power. They can compare the terms offered by the World Bank with those from the New Development Bank. They can weigh a partnership with a European firm against one with a Brazilian or Indian company. This isn't about rejecting the West outright, it's about having the freedom to choose the best deal for their country and their people. It's the difference between being a price taker and a market maker. This is what economic sovereignty looks like in the 21st century. The power to choose, the power to build, and the power to chart your own economic course. Talk is cheap, but capital is king. The leaders of the Global South understood that if they wanted to truly challenge the old financial order, they couldn't just complain about it. They had to build their own. This is the logic behind the creation of the New Development Bank, often called the BRICS Bank. Established in 2015 with an initial capitalization of $50 billion, the NDB represents the most concrete challenge to the dominance of the Washington-based IMF and World Bank. Its mission is not to replace these institutions, but to provide a much-needed alternative. Its headquarters in Shanghai, not Washington, D.C., is a powerful symbol of this shifting economic gravity from west to east. So, what makes the NDB different? First, its lending philosophy. While traditional lenders often attach stringent policy conditions to their loans, demanding privatization, deregulation, or austerity, the NDB focuses primarily on financing infrastructure and sustainable development projects. It gives borrowing countries more say in how projects are designed and implemented, treating them as partners rather than pupils. This approach respects national sovereignty and allows governments to pursue development strategies that are tailored to their own specific needs and priorities. For an African nation looking to build a new dam or a solar farm, this means getting the project done without having to overhaul its entire economic policy in the process. Furthermore, the NDB is a pioneer in lending in local currencies. This is a crucial innovation that directly supports the goal of de-dollarization. For example, the bank has provided loans in South African rand for projects within South Africa. This simple change has huge implications. It means the country doesn't have to worry about its debt ballooning if the exchange rate with the US dollar suddenly changes. It reduces risk and makes long-term financial planning more stable. At the 2024 summit in Kazan, the BRICS leaders made it a priority to expand this practice, creating a financial ecosystem where members can increasingly borrow and repay in their own money, strengthening their own currencies and financial systems in the process. Alongside the NDB is the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, a $100 billion fund designed to protect member countries from global financial shocks. Think of it as a collective safety net. If a member country faces a sudden balance of payments crisis, it can draw on these funds to stabilize its currency and economy. This provides a buffer against the kind of financial panics that have historically devastated developing economies. Together, the NDB and the CRA form the pillars of a new financial architecture. They are not just banks or funds, they are declarations of independence, providing the tools for the Global South to finance its own development and secure its own financial stability, free from external pressure. Africa is not poor, it is a continent of immense wealth. It holds a staggering percentage of the world's most critical resources. From cobalt in the Congo, which powers our smartphones and electric cars, to platinum in South Africa, essential for clean energy technologies, the building blocks of the modern global economy lie beneath African soil. The continent also possesses vast reserves of oil and gas, from Nigeria to Algeria, and massive potential for renewable energy, from the Saharan sun to the winds along its coastlines. For centuries, this wealth has been a curse as much as a blessing, extracted by outside powers with little benefit flowing to the people who live there. But that dynamic is starting to change. In this new era, African nations are asserting greater control over their natural resources. They are no longer willing to simply sign away mining rights for a pittance. Instead, they are demanding a bigger share of the profits, insisting on value addition at home, and using their resource wealth as a powerful bargaining chip in global negotiations. The rise of BRICS provides new markets and new partners for these resources. China and India's insatiable demand for energy and raw materials gives African producers more options. They are no longer captive to a handful of Western buyers. This competition allows them to negotiate better deals, ensuring that more of the wealth generated from their land stays on the continent to fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. This creates a fascinating and complex debate around development and climate change. Western nations, having built their own prosperity on centuries of fossil fuel consumption, are now pressuring African countries to leapfrog directly to green energy, often while their own oil and gas production continues. This stance is increasingly viewed as hypocritical on the continent. African leaders argue that while they are committed to a sustainable future, they also have a right to use their resources, including natural gas, a cleaner transition fuel, to power their economies and lift their people out of poverty. They argue that energy access is a prerequisite for development, and it is unjust to deny Africa the path that every other developed region has taken. The world runs on energy, and the expanded BRICS bloc is an energy superpower. With members and partners like Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, the group could soon control nearly half of the world's daily oil production. This gives them enormous leverage over global energy markets, a power once held exclusively by a few Western nations and their allies. For African oil and gas producers, this new energy axis offers a shield. It provides a community of powerful producers who can coordinate policy and resist external pressures. In this multipolar world, Africa's resources are not just commodities to be sold. They are strategic assets that give the continent a powerful and undeniable voice in the most critical conversations shaping the global future. The West is watching this tectonic shift with a mixture of concern, confusion, and condescension. The old certainties of a unipolar world, where Washington set the rules and its allies fell in line, are crumbling. The rise of BRICS, with Africa playing an increasingly central role, is a direct challenge to this long-held dominance. The reaction from Western capitals has been varied and often contradictory. On one hand, there is an acknowledgement that the world has changed, and a greater effort to engage with African nations as partners. On the other hand, there is a clear pushback against the forces of multipolarity, revealing a deep-seated reluctance to relinquish control. This pushback takes several forms. Diplomatically, there is pressure. The United States, for instance, has expressed unease with countries that are seen as getting too close to Russia or China. South Africa's friendly relations with Russia have strained its ties with Washington. Economically, the threat of sanctions remains a powerful tool. The US dollar's dominance in the global financial system gives America the ability to punish countries by cutting them off from international markets. The more countries talk about de-dollarization, the more pronounced the threats of tariffs and other economic penalties become, creating a high-stakes environment for nations trying to navigate between the old and new powers. For many nations in the global south, BRICS offers what has been described as a safe harbor. It's a space where they can pursue their national interests without constant fear of Western political interference or economic punishment. It's an alliance of countries that have, at one time or another, been on the receiving end of sanctions, lectures, or conditional loans. This shared experience creates a powerful bond and a collective desire to build a system with different rules. The West often frames this as a choice between democracy and autocracy, but for many African nations, it's a far more practical choice between a partnership that comes with endless conditions and one that offers investment with respect for their sovereignty. As a result, the global chessboard is being redrawn. It's no longer a simple game of two players. New powers are emerging, old alliances are being reevaluated, and Africa is at the very center of this transformation. The West is being forced to compete for influence on a continent it once took for granted. This means offering better terms, showing more respect, and listening more than it lectures. The rise of BRICS and Africa's engagement with it has not destroyed the West's relationship with the continent, but it has fundamentally changed it. It has forced a reckoning, compelling the old powers to adapt to a new world where they are no longer the only game in town. It's tempting to look at this new world and see a simple binary divide. BRICS versus the West, East versus West, a new Cold War. But that's a lazy and outdated frame. The reality is far more interesting and complex. The world is not cleanly splitting into two hostile camps. Instead, we are entering an era of co-opetition, a messy, dynamic, and often contradictory mix of cooperation and competition. Nations are forming alliances on some issues while remaining fierce rivals on others. Africa, in this new landscape, is not a pawn to be fought over by competing blocs. It is an increasingly sophisticated player, skillfully navigating this complex terrain to advance its own interests. African nations are demonstrating a new level of diplomatic maturity. They are refusing to be forced into choosing sides. An African leader might attend a BRICS summit in Kazan one week to discuss financial cooperation, and then fly to a G7 meeting the next week to talk about climate change and security. They will sign an infrastructure deal with a Chinese company, while their military conducts joint exercises with the US. This is not confusion, it is strategy. It's about building a diversified portfolio of partnerships, drawing the best from all sides, and maintaining the flexibility to act independently. They are acting in their own self-interest, just as every other powerful nation has always done. This new reality requires a new way of thinking. Global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and economic stability cannot be solved by one bloc alone. They require cooperation between the West, BRICS, and everyone in between. For example, the minerals needed for the green energy transition are in Africa, the manufacturing capacity is in China, and much of the technology and capital is in the West. No single group can build a green global economy on its own. This interdependence forces even the fiercest competitors to find ways to work together. Africa, as a continent that bridges many of these divides, is perfectly positioned to be a mediator and a consensus builder in this new world. Africa is actively shaping the terms of this new global order. By joining and influencing institutions like BRICS, African nations are not just reacting to change, they are driving it. They are injecting their priorities, their values, and their vision into the heart of global governance. They are pushing for a system that is more inclusive, more representative, and more just. This is not about tearing down the old order out of spite. It is about building something new and better in its place. In the world of co-opetition, Africa's role is not to be a prize in a great power struggle, but to be an independent pole of influence, a shaper of consensus, and a key architect of the 21st century world. And so, we stand at a profound turning point in world history. The script that governed global affairs for the past century is being torn up, and a new one is being written. At the heart of this new story is a resurgent Africa, no longer at the margins of international life but at its very center. The continent's journey is not about choosing between the West and the rest, it is about choosing itself. It is about a continent of 1.4 billion people, brimming with youthful energy and ancient wisdom, finally taking the pen and writing its own future. This is a story of self-determination, a powerful and irreversible shift toward a world where African voices are not just heard, but are listened to and respected. The path ahead will not be easy. There will be internal challenges to overcome and external pressures to resist. But the momentum is undeniable. The call for unity, for dignity, and for a fair share of global prosperity echoes from Cairo to Cape Town, from Dakar to Djibouti. This is the spirit that fuels Africa's engagement with BRICS and its broader push for a multipolar world. It is a pragmatic, clear-eyed pursuit of a future where African nations are the primary authors of their own development, where their wealth benefits their own people, and where their place in the world is defined by their potential, not their past. The world must pay attention, not with fear or with paternalism, but with respect. The rise of Africa as a major global player is not a threat, it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to build a more balanced, more resilient, and more just global system. A prosperous and stable Africa is good for the entire world. It means new markets, new sources of innovation, and new partners in solving our shared global challenges. The old top-down model of global governance is obsolete. The future belongs to a network of shared leadership, and Africa is ready to assume its role as a vital hub in that network. Ultimately, this is a story of hope. It is the hope of a generation that refuses to be defined by old stereotypes. It is the hope of a continent that is leveraging its resources, its people, and its newfound influence to claim its rightful place under the sun. The lion has awoken, and its roar is reshaping the world. The future is not something that will happen to Africa, it is something that will be built by Africa. The destiny of this great continent is, at long last, firmly and unequivocally in its own hands, and that is a change that will benefit us all.
Let's talk about global clubs. The G7 was the exclusive group, setting the rules for everyone else. For decades, this small circle of wealthy nations decided how the world's economy should run, often leaving emerging economies with little say in the process. Then came BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, fast-growing economies forming their own power bloc. They challenged the old order, offering a new vision for global cooperation and economic growth, especially for countries outside the traditional Western sphere. In 2023, BRICS expanded, inviting Egypt and Ethiopia, two African giants, to join. This move wasn't just symbolic, it was a recognition of Africa's rising influence and the continent's growing role in shaping the future. This isn't just a few new members, it's a major shift in global power. It signals a new era where African voices are not only heard, but are central to decision-making on the world stage. Imagine the world economy as a pizza. For years, a few countries took the biggest slices. Now Egypt and Ethiopia are bringing their own pizzas and changing the menu. They're not just asking for a bigger piece, they're helping decide what toppings go on. African nations are no longer content to be on the sidelines, they're demanding a voice in setting the agenda. They want to shape the rules, not just follow them, and their participation is making global conversations richer and more diverse. For centuries, Africa's story was told by outsiders. Now, Egypt and Ethiopia are flipping the script by joining BRICS. They're taking control of their narrative and showing the world the strength and potential of the continent. This is about more than economics. It's about dignity, sovereignty, and reshaping global power. It's about African countries standing tall, proud of their heritage, and determined to influence the future. The old world order, where a few capitals made all the calls, is fading. The future is multipolar, and Africa is a key player. The continent's cities are buzzing with ambition, innovation, and a new sense of purpose. Egypt, with its ancient history and control of a vital waterway, and Ethiopia, never colonized and rapidly growing, are stepping up. Their unique strengths and strategic locations make them essential partners in global affairs. Their inclusion recognizes their strategic importance and signals that Africa must have a prime seat at the table. It's a message to the world that Africa's contributions can no longer be overlooked. This is empowerment. Africa is no longer just on the agenda, it's helping set it. Young leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries are stepping forward, ready to shape the continent's destiny. Egypt and Ethiopia aren't just joining a club, they're helping design a new world order. They're bringing fresh ideas, new perspectives, and a determination to build a fairer, more inclusive global system. The Global Kids Table just got a lot more interesting. With Africa's youth and energy, the future of international cooperation looks brighter and more dynamic than ever. The world is watching as Africa claims its place. This is just the beginning of a new chapter in global history, one where Africa helps write the rules. Picture this. You're sitting at home in Europe and you order a phone from Asia with just a few taps on your screen. It seems simple, but behind the scenes, your package is about to embark on a journey that spans continents and oceans. That phone could take the long, treacherous route all the way around Africa, or it could use the shortcut, the legendary Suez Canal, slicing days off the trip. The Suez Canal is Egypt's golden ticket, a 120-mile express lane that connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, making it one of the most vital arteries for global trade. Every day, billions of dollars in goods, everything from electronics to energy, pass through its waters. And when the canal is blocked, even for a few hours, The world feels the shockwaves, delays, shortages, and skyrocketing shipping costs. Egypt's control over this choke point gives it unique leverage in global affairs, making it a key player in international negotiations. By joining BRICS, Egypt brings this strategic asset to the table, like showing up to a poker game with a royal flush, instantly raising the stakes. For BRICS, having Egypt on board means more influence over global shipping and energy routes, and a stronger voice in shaping the future of trade. It also means reducing reliance on Western-controlled passages, giving BRICS countries more options and flexibility. Egypt is now a global logistics superpower, not just a regional player, with the ability to shape supply chains worldwide. Joining BRICS lets Egypt diversify its partnerships, moving beyond a West-centric foreign policy and opening doors to new alliances. It's not about abandoning old allies or burning bridges, but about gaining new ones, expanding its influence, and achieving greater independence on the world stage. Egypt can now leverage the canal to build stronger ties with China, India, and Russia, forging partnerships that could reshape global commerce. This is 21st century strategy, using a 150-year-old canal to navigate a rapidly changing world, where alliances and trade routes are constantly evolving. Egypt is playing the global game on its own terms, turning geography into power and opportunity. Now, let's head south to Ethiopia, a powerhouse for different reasons. With over 120 million people, Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous nation, a young, dynamic workforce in a world of aging populations. Its location in the Horn of Africa makes it a crossroads of Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian Ocean. Addis Ababa is the African Union's HQ, a diplomatic hub for the continent. Ethiopia's stability and growth ripple across East Africa. By joining BRICS, Ethiopia gives the bloc a strategic foothold in a vital region. Ethiopia's fierce independence, it was never colonized, shapes its desire for equal partnerships. BRICS membership elevates Ethiopia from regional to global player, opening new markets and investment. The Horn of Africa now has a louder voice on the world stage. For decades, Africa was a guest at the global table, present but rarely invited to shape the main event. Its voice was often overlooked, its influence underestimated, and its potential sidelined in major decisions. Now, with Egypt and Ethiopia joining BRICS, Africa is signaling that it's done being a spectator. The continent is stepping forward, demanding a seat and a say in the world's most important conversations. This isn't just symbolic, it's a structural shift in global power. Africa's participation is changing the very architecture of international relations. Two major African nations now help shape the agenda of a bloc, representing over 40% of the world's population, influencing decisions that affect billions. Africa is now a pillar, not just a topic. Its leaders are recognized as equals, not just participants. African leaders are in the room, negotiating deals, shaping global policy, and making their voices heard on the world stage. A new generation is pushing for partnership, not patronage, building economies with new partners, forging relationships with fewer strings attached, and driving innovation from within. Africa is taking control of its destiny, one alliance at a time, and rewriting the rules of engagement. We're witnessing the decolonization of the international system, a shift toward true equality and respect. The world is now multipolar, with Africa emerging as a key pole, an essential force in shaping the future. Africa is united, confident, and assertive, building a bigger, more inclusive table for all nations. The world is finally recognizing Africa's power, influence, and leadership. The center stage is no longer reserved for others. Africa has claimed its place, and the world is watching. Meanwhile, the West looks fractured. Once seen as stable and united, Western countries now face deep divisions, protests, economic anxiety, and political gridlock. Inflation and rising costs have shaken public trust and made consensus elusive. Internal turmoil weakens the West's ability to lead globally. Foreign leaders see a distracted, divided bloc, creating space for new powers like BRICS. A country divided at home struggles to project power abroad. While the West debates its future, Africa and the Global South are building a new world order. The power shift is as much about Western challenges as it is about others rising. The West's favorite tool, sanctions, once packed a punch. But the world has changed. The global economy is no longer centered on the West. New markets and supply chains have emerged. Sanctions on Russia showed this shift. Many countries refused to join, and Russia found new partners. The world isn't automatically following the West's lead anymore. BRICS is building alternatives, trading in local currencies, new financial institutions, and safety nets for those resisting Western pressure. African nations now have more room to maneuver, no longer bound by Western approval. The threat of sanctions is losing its bite. This is a symptom of a declining unipolar world. Influence must now be earned through partnership, not coercion. For Africa, this means more independence and leverage. The rules of the game are changing, and Africa is playing to win. For decades, Western aid to Africa came with strings attached. Privatize this, adopt that policy. This created dependency and frustration. Now Africa's response is, thanks but no thanks. Countries like Burkina Faso are asking foreign troops to leave, asserting sovereignty. South Africa maintains an independent foreign policy, refusing to be drawn into others' conflicts. The new diplomacy is about mutual respect and national interest, not picking sides in a new Cold War. China and others offer alternatives with fewer conditions, giving Africa leverage. African nations can now negotiate from strength, not weakness. The era of one-sided conditional aid is ending. Africa is finally in the driver's seat. This is more than policy change, it's a new African diplomacy. It's not anti-West or pro-East, it's pro-Africa. African diplomacy is now proactive, shaping the agenda and future. Strategic autonomy is key. African nations choose their partners freely. Leaders like Senegal's Macky Sall engage all sides, representing Africa's interests first. Pan-African unity is growing. AFCFTA boosts trade and bargaining power. Africa negotiates as a bloc, not as 54 separate countries. The new diplomacy embraces a multipolar world. More options, more balance. Africa isn't replacing one hegemon with another, but building a fairer system. This vision is being realized from Cairo to Pretoria, Addis Ababa to Abuja. Africa is shaping its own destiny. Put it all together. Egypt and Ethiopia in BRICS, the West's waning influence, and a new African diplomacy. And you see a global power shift. The old order is over. A multipolar world is here, with Africa as a central architect. The African century isn't coming. It's begun. African nations now have more choices and leverage, playing powers off each other for the best deals. The world must approach Africa as a partner, not a donor. A more balanced world is a more stable world. Africa's rise brings new ideas and solutions to global challenges. A stronger Africa means a stronger international community. Africa's population and economies are growing. Its influence will only increase. Decisions in African capitals will shape the world. The 21st century story can't be written without Africa leading. The continent has risen, confident, independent, and ambitious. The future is being built on African soil.
All right, let's talk about BRICS. No, it's not a new type of Lego for adults, although building a new world order can feel like that sometimes. BRICS is an acronym, a fancy word for a name made from the first letters of other words. In this case, it stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Think of it as a club, a supergroup of some of the world's biggest and fastest-growing economies. It's like the Avengers, but instead of superheroes, you have countries. And instead of fighting Thanos, they're trying to figure out how to get a bigger say in how the world is run, which, let's be honest, can sometimes feel just as complicated. These 5 countries are spread all over the globe, from the sunny beaches of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to the vast landscapes of Siberia in Russia. You've got the incredible diversity and tech boom of India, the manufacturing powerhouse that is China, and my beautiful home, the rainbow nation of South Africa. Together, they represent a massive chunk of the world. We're talking about a significant portion of the planet's land, its people, and its economic muscle. They decided that instead of always playing by rules set by others, maybe it was time they started writing a few of their own. It's a bold move, like starting your own group chat because the main one has too many weird rules. So what do they do in this club? They meet up, they talk, they make deals. Their goal is to cooperate on everything from finance and trade to technology and culture. They even started their own bank, the New Development Bank, which is a pretty big deal. It's like saying, hey, we appreciate the World Bank, But we'd also like a bank that understands our specific needs. It's about creating alternatives and making the global system a little more balanced. They believe that the world shouldn't just be run by a small handful of countries from one corner of the globe. They're pushing for a multipolar world, where power is shared more evenly. Ultimately, BRICS is a story about change. It's about emerging economies finding their voice on the world stage and working together to build a future that reflects their own strengths and aspirations. It's a fascinating experiment in international relations, a group of diverse nations trying to find common ground to reshape the global landscape. They are a powerful symbol of a shifting world where the old centers of power are being joined by new, dynamic players. And let me tell you, watching this unfold is more exciting than any reality TV show. Because this is real life, and the stakes are incredibly high for everyone. So how did this whole BRICS thing even begin? It actually started as an idea from an economist, a guy named Jim O'Neill, who worked for Goldman Sachs. Back in 2001, he looked at the world and saw these four huge, rapidly growing economies: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. He basically said, "Yo, pay attention to these guys. They're going to be a big deal." He called them the BRIC countries. At first, it was just a catchy term for investors, a way to group these promising markets together. It was like a music producer spotting four talented artists and saying, "We should form a band." For a few years, it was just an idea on paper. But then, the countries themselves started thinking, "Hey, that's not a bad idea. We a big deal." They saw they had a lot in common. They were all large countries with growing influence, and they often felt that the global economic system, dominated by Western powers for centuries, didn't always serve their best interests. So they decided to make the acronym a reality. In 2009, their leaders held their first official summit. It was a historic moment. They went from being a concept in an investment report to a real political and economic alliance. Then, in 2010, the group decided to expand. They looked around and saw another rising star, a country that could represent an entire, incredibly important continent. And that country was, you guessed it, South Africa, my home. When South Africa joined, the BRIC became BRICS. Adding the S was huge. It wasn't just about adding another country, it was about bringing Africa into the conversation. It was a powerful statement that you can't talk about the future of the global economy without including the African continent. South Africa became the gateway, the bridge connecting this powerful bloc to the immense potential of Africa. This formation story is crucial because it shows that BRICS wasn't born out of conflict, but out of a shared vision for a more inclusive world. These countries weren't trying to tear down the old system as much as they were trying to build something new alongside it. They wanted to create a space where their voices could be heard, where they could trade with each other more easily, and where they could fund projects that mattered to them without having to ask for permission. It's a story of empowerment, of countries realizing their collective strength and deciding to use it to shape their own destinies. When you really look at the numbers, you start to understand why BRICS is such a big deal. Let's do a little comparison. The G7, the club of established Western economies like the USA, UK, Germany, and Japan, has long been seen as the world's economic steering committee. And for a long time, they were. But things are changing, and fast. In terms of sheer landmass, the BRICS countries are enormous. They cover nearly 30% of the world's land area. That's a massive amount of territory, filled with incredible natural resources, from oil in Russia to iron ore in Brazil and minerals across Africa. But it's not just about land, it's about people. The BRICS nations are home to over 40% of the world's population. That's more than 3 billion people. Think about that. Almost every other person on this planet lives in a BRICS country. This isn't just a statistic. It represents a gigantic pool of workers, innovators, and consumers. It's a market that no global company can ignore. While many Western nations are facing aging populations, the BRICS countries, especially India and South Africa, have incredibly young, dynamic populations ready to work, create, and build the future. This demographic advantage is a powerful engine for growth. Now let's talk money, because money talks. For years, the G7 had the largest combined economy, but the BRICS countries have been catching up at an incredible pace. In fact, if you measure their economies by something called purchasing power parity, which is a fairer way to compare what money can actually buy in different countries. The BRICS bloc has already overtaken the G7. This is a monumental shift in global economic power. It means that the center of economic gravity is moving from the West to the East and the South. The engine of global growth is no longer where it used to be. This shift is not just about competing, it's about creating a more balanced world. The BRICS nations argue that a world economy dominated by one group of countries is not stable or fair. They are building new trade routes, new financial institutions, and new partnerships that don't all run through Washington or London. They are creating a multipolar world where different regions can thrive and cooperate on their own terms. It's not about replacing the old guard, but about making the stage bigger so there's room for more actors. And that, my friends, makes the whole world a more interesting, dynamic, and resilient place. Now let's talk about my favorite subject, Africa. For a long time, the story about Africa was all about problems. But that story is old, it's tired, and frankly, it's wrong. Today, the real story of Africa is one of immense potential and opportunity. And the BRICS countries, especially with South Africa in the mix, see this clearly. Why is Africa so important right now? 3 things: people, resources, and land. First, the people. Africa has the youngest population in the world. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African. This isn't just a statistic, it's a demographic dividend, a massive, energetic, and creative workforce ready to build the future. This youthful energy is fueling incredible innovation. Forget the stereotypes. Africa is a hotbed of technological creativity. In cities like Lagos, Nairobi, and Cape Town, tech startups are solving real-world problems. You have companies like Flutterwave in Nigeria, which is making it easy for businesses across the continent to get paid, or M-Pesa in Kenya, which revolutionized mobile money long before it was cool in the West. These aren't just copycats, they are pioneers creating solutions for their unique environments. This is the kind of grassroots innovation that changes the world, and it's happening right now all across the continent. Then, of course, there are the resources. Africa is sitting on a treasure trove of natural wealth. From the vast oil reserves in Nigeria and Angola to the cobalt in the DRC, which is essential for the batteries in your smartphone and electric car, the continent has the raw materials that power the global economy. This isn't just about digging stuff out of the ground. The new vision is about processing these resources within Africa, creating manufacturing jobs and building industries that add value right here at home. This way, the wealth generated from Africa's resources benefits African people. This is where the partnership with BRICS becomes so powerful. Countries like China and India are investing heavily in African infrastructure, building roads, railways, and ports that connect the continent and unlock its potential. Brazil is sharing its agricultural expertise to help turn Africa's vast, uncultivated land into a global breadbasket. This is a relationship built on a shared vision of growth and development. It's about partnership, not charity. Africa is no longer a continent to be saved. It is a continent on the rise, a future global powerhouse, and with partners like the BRICS nations, that future is arriving faster than ever.
For centuries, the West, America and Europe, sat at the center of global power. Their influence stretched across continents, shaping the world's politics, economies, and even dreams. From skyscrapers in New York to the grand halls of Paris, the West was the model others aspired to follow. They set the rules, printed the money, and shaped culture. Western music, movies, and brands became global icons. The world's financial systems and international organizations were built in their image. Success, loans, and trends, you looked west. If you wanted to make it big, you followed their playbook. The West was the gold standard, the place where dreams were made and fortunes built. But now, the ground beneath that pedestal is shaking. The certainty that once defined the West is giving way to doubt and disruption. In the US, political divisions run deep. Neighbors argue, families split, and trust in institutions is at an all-time low. Protests are common, and people question if the system still works for them. The American dream feels out of reach for many, replaced by frustration and uncertainty. Europe faces similar turmoil, economic anxiety, soaring costs, and political polarization. Once stable societies now wrestle with rising prices, job insecurity, and debates over identity. The unity of the European Union is under strain, tested by internal disagreements and external pressures. Brexit was just the beginning. Now, new challenges threaten to pull the bloc apart. The West's moral authority is eroding. Scandals, corruption, and double standards have made it harder for the West to claim the high ground. How can you lecture others on stability when your own house is in chaos? The world is watching, and the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Other countries, especially in Africa, are watching and asking, maybe their way isn't the only way. Maybe it's time to chart a new course, one that fits our realities and dreams. The cracks in Western dominance are opening space for new ideas and new leaders. Innovation is bubbling up from unexpected places and the world is taking notice. The world's center of gravity is shifting and the West's pedestal is looking wobbly. The old certainties are gone, replaced by a sense of possibility and risk. The old default is gone. The world is ready for something new. Young people, especially across Africa, are dreaming bigger and building bolder than ever before. The question is, who will step up? Who will shape the next chapter of global leadership and innovation? The answer may surprise you. It may come from places the world once overlooked, from voices that were once ignored. The world is watching, and so is Africa. The continent is not just a spectator, it's becoming a key player in the story of what comes next. The time for new voices is here. The world is hungry for fresh ideas, for leaders who understand the challenges of today and the hopes of tomorrow. The West's era of unquestioned dominance is ending. The maps are being redrawn and the headlines are changing fast. The stage is set for change. The world is ready for new leaders, new ideas, and a new direction. The question is, are you ready to be part of it? For decades, sanctions were the West's favorite tool, seen as powerful, clean, and effective, a way to pressure rivals without firing a single shot. They were wielded with confidence, shaping global politics and economics from afar. But now, the tables have turned. Sanctions on major global players have started to boomerang, sending unexpected shockwaves through Western economies themselves. What was once a weapon of control has become a source of vulnerability. Gas prices in Ohio, food costs in Paris, across continents the cost of living is rising. Everyday essentials are suddenly more expensive, and families everywhere are feeling the pinch. Inflation is no longer just an economic term, it's a daily struggle for millions. People are forced to make tough choices, cutting back on basics and worrying about the future. This economic pain is fueling anger and distrust in Western institutions. Protests are growing and faith in old systems is fading as people demand answers and relief. Meanwhile, other nations are watching closely and learning valuable lessons. They see that relying on a system controlled by a handful of powerful countries is risky, and they're preparing to chart their own course. The search for alternatives is on. New financial systems are being built, new trade routes are opening, and fresh partnerships are forming across continents. The West's attempt to enforce the old order has, ironically, accelerated the creation of a new one that is more diverse, more resilient, and less dependent on any single power. The world is diversifying, and Africa is paying close attention. Leaders and thinkers across the continent are studying these shifts, ready to seize new opportunities. The era of Western economic dominance is being challenged from all sides. New voices and new powers are rising, demanding a seat at the table. The boomerang effect is real, and it's changing the global game in ways few could have predicted. The world is watching, adapting, and moving forward. The rules are being rewritten, and this time everyone wants a say in what comes next. For years, aid to Africa came with strings attached, money plus a list of conditions. Western donors expected reforms, often undermining African sovereignty. Now a new generation of African leaders is saying, no more. They want partnerships, not lectures. They want respect, not instructions. African countries are turning down loans with harsh terms and seeking deals that empower, not entangle. The aid landscape is shifting. Africa has options, new partners from the East and Global South. The continent is no longer just an aid recipient, it's an active agent choosing its own path. The message is clear. Africa's future will be decided in Africa. The age of conditional aid is ending. Africa is charting its own course. The image of the African leader is changing. No longer dependent or reactive, today's leaders are confident, independent, and unapologetically African. They step onto the world stage as equals, not supplicants. This new diplomacy is proactive and strategic, rooted in Pan-African pride. African leaders are demanding seats at global tables, forging alliances and setting agendas. They're moving from being agenda takers to agenda setters. The world is being forced to see Africa as a partner, not a problem. Africa's greatest resource is its people, and its leaders know it. The new African diplomat is redefining global leadership. The world is finally listening. Africa's voice is louder than ever. Africa's economic story is being rewritten, not in mines but in tech hubs. From Kenya's Silicon Savannah to Kigali's innovation centers, African startups are leapfrogging old systems. Mobile payments, smart cities, and homegrown apps are transforming daily life. African nations are even reaching for the stars, launching satellites for real-world solutions. The next generation is coding, building, and innovating. Schools and coding camps are nurturing a vast pool of talent. Africa's youth are not just consumers of technology, they're creators. With the African Continental Free Trade Area, a massive single market is emerging. The ingredients for a tech-driven boom are all here. The future is being coded in Africa. The world should take note. Africa's tech revolution is just beginning. The continent is ready to lead. For decades, global decisions were made by a select few, the G7, the West. If you weren't in the room, you weren't heard. Then came BRICS, a new table for rising powers. With Africa's growing presence, especially through Egypt and Ethiopia, the Bloc is transforming. BRICS now gives Africa a central voice in shaping the global agenda. This isn't about swapping one master for another, it's about options. African nations can now choose partners that serve their interests. Competition for influence empowers Africa to negotiate better deals. The expansion of BRICS is just the start. Africa is reclaiming agency on the world stage. The global order is becoming truly multipolar. Africa is at the table, and helping set the menu. Africa's diversity is its strength, but also a challenge. Colonial borders and divide-and-rule tactics left deep divisions. To lead globally, Africa must unite. Pan-Africanism is more urgent than ever. A united Africa. 1.4 billion people, $3 trillion GDP, would be a global force. Unity means strengthening the African Union, demanding global reforms, and speaking with one voice. Economically, the African Continental Free Trade Area is a game-changer. Trading within Africa builds prosperity and self-reliance. Imagine a car assembled from parts made across the continent. Unity is the key to Africa's future. The world can't ignore a united Africa. The time to build together is now. Africa's roar is getting louder. Africa's rise depends on unity, not just among leaders, but across generations and borders. With the world's youngest population, Africa's youth are its greatest asset. Their energy and innovation must be matched with the wisdom of elders. Intergenerational dialogue, mentorship, and youth inclusion are essential. Beyond generations, Africa must break down barriers between nations. More cultural exchanges, student programs, and cross-border ventures will build a shared identity. When young Africans collaborate across borders, innovation flourishes. Trust and understanding are the glue of integration. This is how Pan-Africanism becomes a lived reality. The future belongs to a connected, united Africa. The work starts now. The world stands at a pivotal crossroads, a moment in history where old certainties are dissolving and new possibilities are emerging. The old order, shaped by centuries of outside influence and control, is fading into the past. For generations, Africa was cast as a supporting character in the world's story, its voice often unheard, its potential overlooked. But that narrative is changing, and a new chapter is being written. Global turmoil, shifting alliances, and the search for new solutions are signaling a profound rebalancing of power and influence. This is Africa's moment to step boldly into the spotlight. No permission needed, no validation required. The continent is rich in what the future demands. A dynamic, youthful population, abundant natural resources, and a new generation of bold, visionary leaders ready to shape tomorrow. Africa's leadership will not mirror the past. It will be collaborative, inclusive, and deeply rooted in the strength of community and shared purpose. The world needs Africa's philosophy of shared humanity, Ubuntu, the belief that we are all connected and that our destinies are intertwined. Africa can show the world a new way forward, one that values cooperation over competition and unity over division. From bustling tech hubs to the corridors of diplomacy, From creative industries to scientific innovation, a new Africa is rising, confident, ambitious, and ready to shape its own destiny. The journey ahead will not be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but the direction is clear, and the resolve is unshakable. The 21st century will be shaped by Africa's rise, by its innovation, its resilience, and its vision for a better world. The time for waiting is over. The world can no longer afford to ignore Africa's voice or its potential. The time for leading is now. The world is watching.